Hi guys, and welcome to another Databases 101 video. So in this video we'll have a look at DDL statements, that is data definition language, what it is and how we can use it to build our database. So first off, what is DDL? DDL is essentially a language that we use to tell the RDBMS, or let's say our computer, how we want to build our database. So when we're building a database, first off, let's say we want to create it, so we can do something like create database and then give it a name. Then afterwards we want to create different tables for it, so we can create these tables as well alongside the columns that go in each of our tables. But other than building the database itself, we can use it to delete stuff, truncate stuff, or alter the tables or some other stuff that we're working with. So overall, we have four types of DDL statements that I'm going to mention in this video. First off is the create statement. The second one is the drop statement. The third one is the alter. And the fourth one is the truncate. I'm missing an E here. So first, let's mention the 2, 3, and 4 items here. So first off, the drop statements means that we're dropping something. We're dropping a database, we're dropping a table, and in database terms, when you say drop, you mean delete. So when I say drop database X, it means delete database X, and alongside, of course, everything that's inside the database, so all the tables and all the data. This guy here, the alter statement, is used to alter something in our database. I mean, it's really common sense, as you might think. So we have already made our database, we have built it already, so we have, let's say, 3 tables or something like that. And let's say that in one of our tables we want to add another column. So what we're doing, we're not going to build it from scratch again, but rather we're going to alter it. So we can write something like alter table X, add column, and then give it a name, a type, and so on. So we'll have a look in the next videos how that pans out. And the last thing in this list is the truncate statement. So the truncate statement is really used to delete all data inside a table mainly. So if I have, let's say, 5,000 records in a single table, if I say truncate table X, it's going to delete all the rows, all the data in one table, and that's really it. So overall, this covers up the last 3 items in this list, but let's focus on the first one this time. So the create statement, because when we're building a database, we first want to create stuff and then we can alter it, delete it, or truncate stuff later on. Don't get confused, this is just the DDL statements. You have DML statements, that are used to enter data, display data, and so on, but we're not going to talk about that really. First, what we want to learn is how to build a database, how to build a table, and then we'll move on from there. So, the create statement. What we're going to do first is, of course, we want to be able to build the database itself, to make it so. For that purpose, we can use a create database statement. So let me just clear out the whiteboard. So statement number 1, create database. So how does this statement look like? Really simple. Create database and then you give it a name here. And that's essentially it. So this is the simplest possible statement that you can have. Of course, you want to put a semicolon in the end, just to state that this is the single statement that we're working with. Okay, so this was really simple. So moving on, step number 2, we've made our database. Now let's continue on to working with tables inside a database. As you might remember from one of my previous videos where I have drawn something like this. So this is essentially a symbol representing a database. So if my database is named, I don't know, T1, inside T1 we can have basically as many tables as we like. So we can have table 1 or table 2, table 3. And let's just rename this guy here, so let's call it eShop. So this is our database, it's called eShop, and it has 3 tables inside it. And then again, you can do all sorts of connections between the tables themselves, but we'll have a more detailed look at this in our next videos. For now, so get your head around that we have a database, and inside a database we have multiple tables. So let's go about building a table. So I'm going to give you a blueprint of how you might memorize building a table or writing the statement to build a table for MySQL. So this time we're working with MySQL, but like I already mentioned, about 90 to 95% of the statements are the same, just as in SQL Server or PostgreSQL. So don't get too concerned about that. This is just an example in MySQL. So let's get started off. The first thing you want to do is write create table, of course. So it's very intuitive. Create table. And then what you want to do is give it a name. And really it can be anything, and we'll have a more detailed look at this in the practical part of this video. For now, the next thing that you should memorize is that we need open brackets. So the first open bracket is here, and then I'm instantly gonna close it down here and put a semicolon in the end, and I'll explain why. Imagine that this is some kind of a container for your columns. So you're telling the RDBMS or your machine or computer that you want to create a table that's called whatever you want it to be called. And then you're telling it, okay, inside these brackets, I'm going to tell the computer or the RDBMS what columns I want to have inside my table and what type I want them to be. So we can have something like, let's say, name, and it can be a type of varchar. Let's say that it can be 100 length. And then what I'm going to do is put a comma here in the end, because I'm going to want to, I'm missing an A here, so name. Because I want to have 2 columns, so I have to tell my RDBMS, okay, this is one of my columns. The next one is going to be, let's say, last name. And then again, it's going to be a varchar. And it's going to be, again, 100. And this time, I'm not going to put a comma here in the end. Why? Because this is the last column that I'm building inside this table. So that's it. There's no need to put a comma here. If I happen to have another column, then I will have to do the same thing, comma, then input the column I want, and then again, not put a comma here because it would be the last column in our table. And that's pretty much it, I mean, on a more global scale. So stay tuned for the practical part of this video, and we'll have a more closer look and a more detailed look at how we can, again, use these create table statements.
Okay, so continuing on to the practical part of this video. So first off, what you want to do is really create a database. So I'm using PHPMyAdmin as a way to manage my databases. It's just a server, some kind of a server that you can set up on your local computer, so it simulates you having a real server. That's about it. And I'm not going to bother you with how to install it and set it up because it's really simple, especially if you're on Windows. And there are really tons of videos out there and tutorials that will show you that thing. So moving on. The first thing that we mentioned is the create database statement. So I'm gonna type it in here. So like I already mentioned, create database, and then I can name it whatever. So like I used the example in the previous part of this video, it's going to be an eShop. And let's mention a couple of things here. So first off, you do not have to use uppercase letters. It's just some kind of a standard that's used in programming general in MySQL statements. So it's perfectly fine to write also something like this. So it would work either way. The next thing is that you should not have, in terms of database names, a white space for your database name. It just won't work. If your database name contains multiple words, you can separate them using the underscore, and that's about it. So let's execute this statement. And as you might see, here it is. Here's our database, and it has no table inside it. So the next thing we want to do is create a table. Oh yeah, and by the way, so PHPMyAdmin and WAMP and some other software that comes with databases MySQL. I mean, you can use the GUI part, and I mean the graphical user interface, to build the database and to really create a table. It's really simple. It comes down to clicking. And then you might be asking yourself, why would you want to even learn SQL statements when, you have so many software out there that enables you to really, it just automizes everything so you don't have to type it. Well, it's not always going to be as easy as that. Oftentimes, you're on a server as a developer and you want to insert a new column or delete some data or insert some data, and you don't have, in these circumstances, you don't really have a GUI, so you have to rely on your abilities as a developer to type the commands to the computer. So it is really an essential part of your development to learn to type SQL statements, including DDL statements. So I'm not going to show you the GUI way. It's really easy. Right now we're going to focus on the code. So let's create a users table. So create table, and then after these two keywords, as I already mentioned, you can put anything, and in my case, my table is going to be called users. The next thing what you want to do is open up the bracket, and then in terms of memorizing it, it's best to have two empty rows and then close off the bracket and then have a semicolon in the end. Let me just, yeah, create table, users, and then close off this guy here. So like I already mentioned, this is your most basic template, and from here on out, it's a bit more easy to understand how you can write this statement. So let's have two columns. First off, what you want to do is always give the name of the column. So this time it's going to be a name. It's going to be a type of varchar, varchar, and it's going to be a length of 20, or let's give it a length of 100. And then let's have another column. It's going to be called last name. You have many different ways of writing varchar, of writing your column names and table names, so you can separate multiple worded items with underscores, or maybe you can do something like this. It really doesn't matter, but when you pick a convention, just stick to it. Don't mix it up. So we have a table called users, and in that table we have two columns. One is called name, the next one is called last name, and you must not have a comma here in the end, because that tells the computer that you want to have another column, and that's not what we want to do now. So two columns are just fine for us in this moment. But let's just mix it up a bit and have some, let's say, ID of type int, and be done with it. Oh yeah, I'm missing a comma like I mentioned. So as you can see, the software tells you, yeah, something is wrong. A comma or missing bracket was expected. So if you put a comma in, it really solves the issue. So let's run this statement. And then what we get is inside our eShop database, we have one table that is called users. And it has three columns, name, last name, and an ID. So this is the most simple table possible. It does not have any primary keys, any foreign keys. It does not have any not null rules or something like that, because when creating a table, you can do something like this. Let's do another one. Create table products. Let's open up the brackets again. Let's close them off. Semicolon in the end. And then let's create something like, I don't know, serial number. And then you can have something like not null. So this tells our database that this row here, this column must never be empty. It must always have a value. So let me just show you in a minute. Let's have another one. Let's have a, I don't know, name or char, and it can be 500 length. And again, yeah, let's keep it like that. So when we execute this guy, now we have two tables, users and products. Now, if I start to play around with the insertion part of the data, so let me just try and insert some data here. Let's have some kind of product with some kind of name. It can be a TV. And here we can have something like this. It can be a mobile phone. So we have two products now, and let's try a third one. This time, I'm not going to give it a value for the serial number. I'm just going to give it a value for the name. Go. And as you can see, an error pops up and some kind of weird stuff happens here. So this just goes to show that there are more things to be thinking about when creating a table, not just column names and data types. You know, you have all sorts of different things, and we'll be mentioning them in the next videos, including primary keys, foreign keys, and auto increments and all that fun stuff. So stay tuned.